All right, the break is over with. Welcome back. Another new season of Off the Radar.
And we're expecting it to be bigger and better than ever, and maybe you've been patiently awaiting the return of Off the Radar. Here it is. We may be down a few members.
At least from the last time that you watched or listened to an episode, right?
Right, but we got some great thoughts, great ideas where we're going to take it this year. And we've also been a little busy over the course of the summer, which is just flying by.
It's unbelievable, isn't it?
Believe it, that we're on the verge of about ready to turn over the calendar to August. Coming up in a little bit, you're going to hear a little bit more about what's kept us busy over the course of the summer. So looking forward to sharing that with you guys as well. And of course, first and foremost, the weather's always keeping us busy as well.
Always keeping us on our toes. We're in the heart of vacation season right now, so we're kind of been flipping around for us here. We're going to talk about some of the major weather stories that have happened over the past few days. This is going to be kind of a new segment that we're doing right here on Off the Radar, where we talk about not only the local weather, of course we're focused in on that, but we hear everything that's going on nationally, and every now and again we're going to kind of pick a story, break out, and talk about exactly why that happened there, and give you some more perspective on that.
Like perspective on it, as wacky as our weather could be too, there's always stuff that's going on across the country. You'll hear about it in the news headlines, but with Off the Radar, we can get a little bit more detailed with it and break down maybe some science behind it, and also talk about how common it is or if it could happen in our local area.
So if this is your first time watching here on WTOL.com on Off the Radar, our new YouTube channel, welcome. This is a show that is all about geeking out on the weather. Of course, we try to do it as much as we can on TV. This is a new platform for us to go to that next level.
Next level. And sometimes we'll be honest, we need a little balance on there because we dive really deep into the weeds on it. But hey, this is the time we can do that. So happy to have you guys along as well, and certainly hope you continue to follow this. We plan making this a weekly thing that's going to be in on your desktop or maybe on your mobile as well.
We know how big weather is in Northwest Ohio, southeastern Michigan, how many questions there always are that are swirling in the air over our heads, and so we hope this is another outlet for you, or if you know somebody, family member or friend that just loves the weather, this is another chance for them to kind of geek out alongside of us.
Kind of like us.
Yeah, we needed an outlet and here we are.
Seems to work out all right.
Yeah, so talking about that one too. Also, new from last season to this season, we're really excited about this one. Each week, we're going to try to bring on a new guest and give you perspective on their area of expertise. Today, it's going to be an expert from Bowling Green State University, Tim Davis. He's going to be joining us just a little bit later on in this episode to break down not only this season of algae in Lake Erie, but some of the latest research, what's happening. He's going to answer all sorts of questions on this.
Really on the verge of turning it over to August. This is about the time where those algae blooms really could become a significant issue. Obviously, this means a great deal to our local area. We're going to be focusing on a lot of those local issues that impact not only our area, but may impact you as well, and kind of keep you up to date and informed on what's going on in our community as well.
All right, so we said we were going to break out not only local weather, but what's going on across the country. So we thought we'd every week maybe highlight 2 or 3 different things that are going on in the weather around the country and focus in on them. So what do you say?
Let's start it off.
Okay, so flooding has been a major issue across Ohio, the Midwest, and one of those spots that we've seen has been St. Louis. They had what's called an MCS, a mesoscale convective system. Layman's terms?
Big
thunderstorms.
Complex of storms. Absolutely,
a lot of thunderstorms, and they had some damage from that, as you can imagine. I do believe we have some video of some of that flooding that happened down there in St. Louis. You can see this is your standard don't drive in high water video. Of course, cars stall out there, and that's where people get in the most trouble in these sorts of situations.
A lot of times these MCSs are large complexes of storms. They're fueled during the overnight hours. They could sustain much of the night, and it's not uncommon for these to dump 6, 8, even up to 10 inches of rainfall. And there were reports in Missouri of over a half a foot of rainfall. That obviously too much rainfall too quickly leads to that significant flooding. And this is actually one of many of those types of storms that occurred. Had another one that I just saw across the state of Wisconsin that actually brought some major damaging winds, a macro burst, which they believe brought 90-mile-per-hour winds for about a 15-mile stretch.
So macro bursts, what's the difference between that? I think people out there have probably heard microbursts.
Microburst, yeah. Microbursts are very small, compact areas of wind damage.
They're
macro burst is a much larger area sustained for a much longer period of time. I guess the bigger brother to that would be the derecho.
The Dorito. Oh, derecho.
Derecho, yeah. Often confused with Dorito, though.
Nacho cheese.
It always comes back to food.
It really does. All right. Hey, let's talk about, too, this week we had a tropical depression form off the eastern end of Florida. This is something the National Hurricane Center was watching. It got us thinking, we're not really in the heart of hurricane season, but we're getting
But
closer.
it happens very quickly. Maybe Barry was a reminder for that as well, as it went up through Louisiana and actually made its way up into the Ohio River Valley and did bring us some rain. But take a look at this map that we have prepared for you. And this is just a general outlook of tropical systems that form in the month of July. And we can tell you this actually only ramps up as we get into August, as well as we get closer to the peak of our tropical cycle.
Now you're seeing a lot of spaghetti noodles on your map right here, and basically each one of these.
It comes back to food with you.
It really does.
All right, I'll defend you on that one. That is a legit meteorological term.
Spaghetti.
Spaghetti.
So this is the last 10 years July hurricanes in the Atlantic Ocean. You can see it is quite active. A number of those have hit the U.S. and as you mentioned, Barry was technically, I believe, Chris, correct, a Category 1 when it made landfall.
Very, very briefly, it was
for
Category
about 3 minutes.
I think so, yeah. We'll see about that. But you may notice a few of those names on out there that do stand on out. Irma and Matthew, some of the more recent ones and notable ones that do stand out on that list.
All right, so that leads us to our number one weather, I don't know if you want to call it weather event that has happened across the country. This one happened just yesterday, which would have been Tuesday. And what's amazing about this one is it was a tornado, but it was in Massachusetts and it was in the morning. That's not a combination that happens very often.
It's not, and especially geographically for that area as well. It was really kind of interesting to watch the science behind this one, though, as it was hitting in real time. It did hit Cape Cod. Maybe people vacationed on out there.
Check out this video right here.
Watch
you ready?
this. This is the best video you're going to see of the day. Watch the roof.
Woo!
Woof.
And the person keeps recording. I don't know how they keep recording.
Frightening, right? Just as those max winds were coming through. The National Weather Service was actually able to confirm this tornado almost instantly. Now you may ask, well, how were they able to do that one? Because usually it typically takes storm survey crews to head on out there to survey the damage. They were able to determine that this was immediately a tornado by using Doppler radar, and specifically they detected what was a tornado debris signature on radar, and direct confirmation from the National Weather Service office as this was happening real time said, we have a confirmed tornado. Crews are already going to be en route to survey the damage to determine the magnitude of that tornado. So very cool how science has kind of advanced things where we're able to detect and confirm tornadoes just based on scientific data now.
I want to get back to that tornado debris signature in just a second. First, I believe we have a soundbite from somebody over here in Massachusetts as well.
A hard time getting back here because whole trees were blocking roads and power lines down.
So that's an area that has a lot of older trees, and it's neighborhoods that are kind of a little bit smaller as far as the roadways go, so easily blocked there. Gives it credence to what you were talking about just a moment ago, Chris. Tornado debris signature. Woof. That would be an example of something that would be lofted up in the air by a tornado, correct?
Look at the exact video that you saw right there. So tornado comes through, it blows the roof off. That is going to loft insulation, parts of roof, shingles, maybe even 2x4s up into the atmosphere where radar can actually detect them. And radar can determine those are unusual sized particles, and obviously the trajectory or the pattern of that shows it very clearly as a signature on radar. So scientists and meteorologists are able to detect and determine based on foreign objects that get lofted up into a tornado that it is unusual.
So basically radar has become so advanced now, it not only says yes it's raining or it's raining hard, it can tell us is that actually a raindrop or is that a hail drop, is that insects, or is that something totally different? And if it's something totally different, that typically means the things you were just talking about, pieces of buildings, trees, other things like that. And that's not just specific to their radar over there in Massachusetts. That's all National Weather Service radars now has the ability to detect that.
And we can do that right here too as well, analyze and interpret that data. So if there's ever a storm such as that one, we'd be able to do that right here during our tornado coverage as well. By the way, the crews did go out and survey that one. Winds up to 110 miles per hour is pretty strong EF1 tornado.
All right, EF1, amazing. EF1 can do that sort of damage.
It can.
Gets that roof going up, winds just smack it, acts like a sail. Okay, so major story every single summer. Can you believe 5 years since the Toledo water crisis?
That
doesn't seem
seems like it was just a summer or two ago, no doubt about that.
So we've been keeping up with the very latest. Of course, that's our commitment to you out there to see not only what the current conditions are on Lake Erie, but some of the latest research that's been going on as well. And is there a potential end in sight to these algae blooms every single summer, it feels like right now. So we're going to be back in just a moment. We're going to have an expert on that algae in Lake Erie, and we're going to get to answer some of those questions.
Good morning. We begin with breaking news.
An overnight crash cuts power to hundreds.
It's a rainy start to your day, and that will continue into the afternoon.
A crash on 75 northbound has traffic detoured to Alexis Road.
Amazing food, fun, and games this weekend.
Welcome back to Off the Radar. We said we were going to be doing something new this year or this season on Off the Radar, and that is to bring live guests onto the show here, and we're very excited. First one, Tim Davis, Associate Professor of Biological Services at Bowling Green State University. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
This is exciting. You're number one. What do you think?
Well, I didn't know that until you just said it, so I guess that's good.
Cool. All right, so Tim, you have done an immense amount of research in Lake Erie. I think we first met when you were working up at GLURL in Ann Arbor a couple of probably weeks after the Toledo water crisis happened. You've since migrated down to Bowling Green State University. You continue your research there as well. Talk to me a little bit about what you've seen change over the last 5 years and kind of what you do on a daily basis.
Sure. So, well, what I do on a daily basis changes from day to day,
Yeah.
which is great because that's one of the things I really enjoy.
You're not
about
stuck in a
science.
classroom every day or in a
No,
setting like that.
Especially not in summer. You know, we have a lot of students that are out on the lake doing research, not just in Lake Erie, but throughout the state of Ohio. So, you know, we always talk about this kind of raging forest fire in front of us, and we have a little can of water, and I just put out the parts of the fire that are closest to burning my feet. So that's our short-term strategy. Our long-term strategy is that we have seasonal projects going on, trying to understand what's driving the blooms in Lake Erie, what's driving the toxin production by the blooms, the toxin that caused the Toledo water crisis. So we're doing a lot of work in the lake, just routine sampling and working with our federal and state partners. But when you talk about Lake Erie and how it's changed over the past 5 years, maybe since the Toledo water crisis, what I will say is that there's a lot more visibility of the problem, right? So before the Toledo water crisis, the Lake Erie bloom, it's been present since the late
This isn't
90s.
something that just kind of popped out of nowhere. This is something that's been around well before the Toledo water crisis, right?
Absolutely. But it was kind of it was overlooked, right? It was something that had happened in the lake, but it didn't affect people's lives on a day-to-day basis until the Toledo water crisis occurred, and then people realized that, wow, this event that's in the lake can actually impact me, even if I don't go to the lake or go to the lake very rarely, it can still impact my life. So that grabbed a lot of, state, local, national, international attention. So now we're seeing a lot more focus on understanding the bloom, a lot more focus on outreach. So the work that you do and a lot of our other partners do in terms of just trying to take the work that's going on at BGSU and our partners and conveying it in a way that's easily accessible for the general public so that they really understand what is driving the blooms, because the blooms are a problem, but they're not the problem, right? They're the visual symptoms of a watershed that, that's unhealthy.
Talk to me about some of the conundrums you go through almost on a daily basis with this, because as I've dove into this algae issue over the last 5 years or so, I've described it, you said a wildfire, I describe it almost as a spider web, where if you go on one path, there's about 10 issues that seem to spiral off of that as well. What are some of the big issues that kind of just keep perpetuating themselves that you've noticed or run into that make this such a hard issue to kind of really get on top of?
Sure. So that's a great question, because each year Lake Erie gives us a natural experiment, right? There's a different bloom that forms. It starts in different places. Every time we think we have a good handle on something, Lake Erie kind of throws us a curveball every now and again. There is a lot we do know, so the research that we've been conducting has given us a lot of insight into the environmental drivers of these blooms. But when it comes to the curveballs, we get a wind pattern, for example, that creates a circulation in Lake Erie that pushes a bloom to an area where we weren't expecting it. Or like last year, the bloom started almost 2 weeks earlier than we normally expect it to start, right? And that was due to a relatively warm May, which then caused the bloom. So as soon as Lake Erie, we have the nutrients in Lake Erie, so as soon as Lake Erie reaches a temperature where these cyanobacteria like
What
to grow,
temperature is that?
right now it's around 17 degrees Celsius.
Okay.
I'll let you do the conversion on that, because I mainly talk in Celsius. But it's in the 70s. Once it hits that critical threshold, a bloom can form. So if that occurs, depending on when that occurs, that's when we start to see the bloom form. So again, last year, it started early, right? So we had to ramp up monitoring programs earlier than anticipated. In 2015, one of the largest bloom in recorded history, there was so much rain in the late season that the bloom actually started out near the Bass Islands, right? And worked its way westward, where typically it starts out like it is this year along the Michigan coast and Maumee Bay, and then kind of expands eastwards towards the islands as it develops. So every year there's something different, but there are some consistencies, and the year-to-year monitoring that we do, the long-term monitoring that's occurring in the lake, allows us to look at these differences so we can see similarities between years, the differences between years, and that allows us to understand the long-term drivers and the seasonal changes throughout the bloom, which most of the time those are pretty typical. The bloom starts out, very toxic early in the season, tends to be less toxic late in the season, although the scums that form that green paint are always dangerous. So we can see some patterns, but again, Lake Erie is big, it's dynamic, and these blooms therefore are dynamic, so we can't ever take anything for granted.
Talk to me about, I think this is a fair statement to say, most people out there that are listening or watching just want to know, am I going to be able to drink my water safely this year, right? What are the things that we know, and more importantly perhaps, what are the things we don't know yet when making a forecast or looking at the lake right now for the rest of this summer into being able to answer that question for people?
Yeah. Another good question. So I'm going to take your second question first. What we can forecast right now is we can forecast bloom location and movement, right? So the seasonal forecast gives us an idea of how severe the bloom will be in terms of how much biomass will be in the Western Basin at peak density.
So we have an idea of kind of the scale of what it's going to be.
And short-term movements, so we can the Lake Erie harmful algal bloom bulletin gives us a short-term understanding of, okay, the bloom is here, and in the next 5 days it's projected to move.
So for water treatment plants, for charter boat captains, for anybody that has an interest out on the water, that gives them the ability to look at in the short term where it's headed.
Where it is, and also where it is in the water column. So if it's at the surface, it's a recreational issue. If it's being mixed down to depth where the water intakes are, then it becomes more of an intake drinking water issue. Although drinking water treatment plants are always treating the water that comes in for these toxins. So when your first question, is the water safe to drink? Yes, I live in Bowling Green. We have the Bowling Green Water Treatment Plant, draws water from the Maumee River. I and my family drink the water that comes out of the tap. We have to remember that we've had a couple of incidences, right? So the Toledo water crisis in 2014 and the 2013 Carroll Township incident, which was a smaller scale, but same concept, where toxins made it through the drinking water treatment process. However, these blooms have been occurring since the late 90s, as we talked about earlier, and they can last anywhere between 4 and 6 months, and the water treatment plants are treating every day. So for the most part, the water treatment plants are able to remove the toxins that are dangerous and provide safe, clean drinking water out of the tap. When these incidences occur, public trust gets eroded, right? Because we want, and that's understandable.
Everybody gets a little suspicious then. Yeah, sure.
But since then, there are regulations that the water treatment plants have to abide by in terms of testing for the toxins. They test throughout the treatment plant. They test the finished water before it gets distributed. And they are putting in place, and they are making active upgrades to a lot of the treatment plants, especially plants like Toledo, to help ensure that clean drinking water is continued to be provided.
All right, I'd like to pivot a little bit here, Tim. This is one of those events, I think about the Toledo water crisis and the years that have followed, that There's a lot of kids that are out there that are just starting to form opinions on different professions and different things they might want to do with their lives. I can imagine this being a pivotal moment for some kids in the Toledo area in Northwest Ohio that sit there and say, you know, I've never really thought about Lake Erie and the health of Lake Erie and that sort of thing. Walk me through, how did you get to the position where you are today? Was it you saw green scum one day and you thought, wow, that looks pretty fun? How did you get here, and what would you say to the kids that might be out there watching? Like, how do you get to where you might be?
Sure, that's a great question. Well, like a lot of people that live on the Great Lakes, I grew up in New York, but I spent most of my summers on the shores of Lake Michigan. So I always took them for granted, right? They were there, you know, especially Lake Michigan. There's a lot of water. And I was always fascinated. I went from living on the coast of the Atlantic Ocean to Michigan. So I was always fascinated with aquatic biology and marine biology. And I always said to myself, well, I'm never going to study anything that I have to look under a microscope to see. That didn't work out so well for me because I study these blooms that are composed of microscopic organisms. But I really started studying harmful algal blooms on Long Island. When we looked at the ability to provide clean drinking water and how important that is, and how our actions as, you know, a society are impacting this precious resource, that kind of led me away from my track you know, really wanting to study, you know, marine mammals, and you know, marine. Well,
So you've always been a little interested in the weather, or in the water.
always been interested in the water. I spent most of my time on the water, but when we started to look at the impacts we were having on the water, these harmful algal blooms were a direct impact of our actions in the watershed and on the
Sure,
land.
the way we live.
I wanted to, you know, focus my career on, well, how do we provide clean drinking water? How do we clean up these lakes so that we can continue to recreate on them the way I did when I was a kid? And for the most part, there are a lot of places in the Great Lakes, even Lake Erie, where you can do that safely, and these are a world-class resource. But when you're seeing these events occur, obviously it means that, you know, these lakes are unhealthy, and I wanted to dedicate my career to helping clean up these lakes because they are great lakes. They are a unique resource that we have as a region, and, you know, seeing the degradation that was occurring, not just from water quality issues, but invasive species and other issues that we're seeing throughout the Great Lakes, to me, you know, these globally important resources are something that I couldn't overlook, and just wanted to focus my career on helping to improve.
You love what you do, don't you?
Every day, mostly every day.
It shows.
Yes.
So some great knowledge there, Tim. We appreciate you coming up here and spending some time with us on Off the Radar. First guest for Off the Radar.
All right.
Put that feather in your cap. You
I
can
will.
put that up on the wall of fame or something
Can
for
only
you.
go up from here, right?
Tim, thank you very much. And for all of you, we've got more Off the Radar coming up right after this.
Good morning. We begin with breaking news.
An overnight crash cuts power to hundreds.
It's a rainy start to your day, and that will continue into the afternoon.
A crash on 75 northbound has traffic detoured to Alexis Road.
Amazing food, fun, and games this weekend.
All right, welcome back in. Just fascinating to kind of hear about everything going on with the lake.
Yeah, and certainly solutions. We're hopeful for that, and we'll hope to work to that. And as you said before, too, as well, it's a commitment that we're going to do to work toward that, and of course, keep you up to date with the latest.
As we've been saying, this has been a very busy summer. We've had a lot of weather going on.
Can we catch a breath yet?
But this is something that we've been very busy for a number of reasons. Chris, you've been doing some wonderful work, of course, as you've always been doing for the last few years with St. Jude.
Yeah, absolutely. That's kept me busy, and you are starting a brand new initiative as well. Tell us a little bit about this.
We are working, we're calling this Wood County Plays. For those of you that haven't heard about this, we're working to bring an inclusive playground or inclusive playgrounds to Northwest Ohio. We've seen a gap in the ability for children of all abilities to fairly get out and play on playgrounds. And so what we're trying to do is start a fundraising campaign and build the first inclusive playground in Perrysburg. You're seeing photos of an example of one of those down in Findlay right there at the Miracle Park that they have.
And we're starting to see more of these pop up too. What's the main goal you guys want to get out of this?
There's two main goals. One, we want to have a playground. All kids should have the ability to have a place in their community to go play. And right now we don't have that for a number of reasons. Number one, accessibility.
Right.
If a kid uses a walker, uses mulch, or uses a wheelchair, mulch is no good. It's very difficult for independent play in those sorts of situations. And number two, we want all playgrounds to be safe for kids that might have a sensory disorder or something that makes them overwhelmed in an environment of a traditional playground. We want to make sure that their family can let them go there and be safe. So something as simple as fencing around a playground can be very important.
Where do we stand right now with this one, and what's kind of the next step going forward, and what should we be looking forward to into the community?
We're very excited. So we're in the organizational stage of this. You can see some of the renderings that we had out there for the potential playground. Right now we're looking at some of the parks in Perrysburg. We're specifically targeting Rotary Community Park. We're finalizing as we speak right now the exact equipment that will go on it. You can see there's different age appropriate commitments, and you know, it's just exciting. We're hoping to start this, you can see it right there, summer of 2020.
The goal
so next
out
summer,
there.
to have it done.
Looking forward to that one.
Yeah.
We'd love to see that.
So we're excited about that one. Of course, it seems like all about the kids here, and that's what the mission has been for St. Jude as well.
It's been absolutely incredible, and I'll tell you what, this is our third year where we've gone ahead with that St. Jude Dream Home giveaway. It has just been truly spectacular, and I can't thank people enough for supporting this great mission. And I'm so excited because we've officially now sold out of the 2019 St. Jude Dream Home.
Excited. I don't have the cowbell. I'm sorry. No
I wish I
cowbell.
had the cowbell with me here. And the cool thing about this one, it gives me chills every time I think about it. We raised $1 million this year for the kids and families at St. Jude. It's a message we're sharing with you guys as well because it means so much, I think, not just to this community, but for the world. They really take care and think of everything. No child or family ever receives a bill for any medical treatment at St. Jude for their treatment, their travel, their housing, for the really expensive medical care. Think about this. You're working in the yard, you hit your hand with the hammer, and you have to go to the doctor's or urgent care emergency room. Do you know the thousands and thousands of dollars that you get for that bill? Think of how expensive it is when you're battling cancer. And these kids and families never receive a bill for a dime of that treatment. It's truly amazing.
And never have to worry about receiving a bill for that. And that takes a lot off these families.
It does. And for 60 years, that's the commitment that Danny Thomas started out with, and it continues to this day today. So this St. Jude Dream Home back in our community, supporting that mission that Danny Thomas started so many decades ago. And so exciting to say August 15th. That is when the winner of the St. Jude Dream Home giveaway is going to be determined. This home is beautiful down in Perrysburg, built by Buckeye Real Estate Group, almost 2,400 square feet. And if you haven't been out to one of the open houses yet, this is just going to amaze you. People have been overwhelmed by it. Some people have been asking if they could get more tickets. Sorry, not this year. Sold on
Sold out.
out.
All been reserved, right?
They have. So with that fact, the winning ticket has been sold. Question is it yours?
That's a fun thought, isn't it?
It is a fun thought for somebody out there. It's going to be life-changing for them, somebody in this community, but also for the kids.
If you're sitting at home with one of those tickets, put it in a very safe place.
Exactly.
Yes, make sure that it's sitting there for you.
Looking forward to calling your name if you have a ticket on August 15th.
All right, so for people that, of course, want to learn more information about St. Jude, you can go online and get that information and more about the house and the other prizes that are going to be out there. And failed to mention as well, wcplays.org. That's where you can find out more information on our inclusive playground project. So if you want to learn more about that, I would encourage you to go over there. So just some of the things that have been keeping us very busy here on Off the Radar.
We'll keep you connected.
Absolutely.
No doubt about that one.
So this has been a really good first episode. What do you think?
Shake it off a little of the rust, but I think we're back at it, right?
Yeah,
ready to go.
Looking forward to what's going to be another successful season here on Off the Radar. Next week, we're going to bring in some more members for our team.
How about we introduce you to our newest member of the First Alert Weather team? You're going to have to wait, though, till next week.
Might put somebody on the hot seat. All right, for now, that's the latest episode here on Off the Radar. Hope you have a great rest of your week.
Have a good one.